early years, I never really quite understood why suddenly, one day when I had just turned 9, my parents would decide to send me and my younger brothers to study far away in the foothills of the Himalayas in North India. It was almost a 3 days journey from where we lived. I'm a Tibetan born in exile. My parents escaped into exile in 1959 after the occupation of Tibet. They were born in Tibet. Like the others, my parents followed His Holiness the Dalai Lama into exile in India, where we had to rebuild ourselves from the scratch, and it wasn't easy. The sudden change in climate and environment, from the roof of the world to the foothills of the Himalayas and plains of India, lack of resources and opportunities, it posed great challenges for us. In his early years, my father worked as a road construction laborer in the Himalayas. My mother, along with her parents, cleared the dense jungles of Karnataka and southern India to resettle. Each in their own way, they were trying to find a way to live and rebuild themselves. After my mother met my father, she moved from South India to all the way to Northeast India, which was almost around a week's journey, to build their lives together. Initially, they supported themselves by selling sweaters on the streets, and later they opened a small restaurant to support the family. I remember how animated my father would become whenever he reminisced about his past and spoke about his home in Tibet, the valleys, the pastures, the flowers, his parents, his siblings, whom he was forced to leave behind. And this would often be followed by tales of resistance against the Chinese oppression by my people and the struggle that followed after. And this left with me an early impression of who I was and where I came from. Furthermore, he often emphasized that we should always strive to be in service of our people and His Holiness Dalai Lama. In 2008, while I was pursuing my postgraduate studies in London, Tibet witnessed a nationwide uprising. It was unprecedented. Tibetans, predominantly youth from all over, took to the streets and rose against the Chinese occupation of Tibet and called for the return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The early uprisings in the late 50s and 80s took place before I was born, and this was the first time I was witnessing a protest and uprising unfold in Tibet during my lifetime. It galvanized Tibetans everywhere into action. Whether it was the monks of the Drepung Monastery marching through the streets of Lhasa, or it was the riders of the Bora in Amdo taking down the Chinese flag and hoisting the Tibetan flag, I knew I could do more. So began my journey of activists as Students for Free Tibet in the UK, later in India, followed by international coordinator at the International Tibetan Network. Through these, I believe I've been able to be of service to my people and my movement. Yet I knew I could do more. In 2020, I decided to take a step further by running for the office of Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile. I vividly remember how much joy it brought to my father. In hindsight, I believe this was always one of his dreams, where he could see me serve my people and His Holiness the Dalai Lama through the Tibetan government in exile. My father, like many of the elders, spent his final years in exile. He lived long enough to hear the news, yet not long enough to see me take the oath into the office. His hopes, his sacrifice, and his dream for his people live on in me. Over the last 66 years, like me, a new wave of second and third generation of Tibetans are born and raised in exile, following the footsteps of our elders. Yet, to this day, Tibet remains an unresolved conflict. The Tibetan government-in-exile, also known as the Central Tibetan Administration, is located in Dharamsala, in the foothills of the Himalayas in North India, through the Tibetan government in exile, we have made repeated efforts to reach out to the Chinese counterparts to resolve the Sino-Tibet conflict through dialogue and the middle way approach, which was proposed by His Holiness, is the adopted policy of the Tibetan government in exile, which in essence calls for a middle path between two extremes. That is, calling for a genuine autonomy for the three traditional provinces of Tibet under the People's Republic of China without seeking independence nor accepting the current status of China. Since Xi Jinping's ascension to power, a more hardline approach has unfolded in Tibet. In 2021, Tibet Action Institute reported that over 1 million Tibetan children aged from 4 to 18 has been forced into colonial-style boarding schools. Likewise, Tibet continued to remain the least free country, as per the Freedom House report. With the removal of term limit, Xi Jinping has further consolidated his power and transcended his repression beyond the borders into transnational repression. With His Holiness turning 90 this month and our exile spanning 66 years, it has never been more significant for us to ensure that the Tibetan freedom movement not only survives but thrives. And to ensure this, Tibetan government in exile must engage into deep introspection, taking into account the foreseeable challenges, scenarios. It must develop a plan of action, theories of change to ensure that it strengthens itself and also ensure that it becomes resilient. I now understand why my parents suddenly decided to send me far away to study in the foothills of the Himalayas in North India. A mother yearning to reunite with her husband and children, young children simply starving for a handful of meal to survive, a desire not to be oppressed no longer. Beneath the skies and star aboves, we all aspire to be free and happy. I'm Tenzin, and like all of you, I want my people and country to be free. Thank you.